On this channel, I've discussed multiple times across many videos about what makes a video game. I've touched on gameplay, graphics, mechanics, story, and even critical reception, but the one thing I haven't touched on yet is how well a game does financially. Surprisingly, I just haven't touched it yet, and while I was thinking about a video similar to this one that I'm going to be doing in the future, I thought I should probably get this topic out of the way first, especially considering it seemed to be the more difficult of the two to write a script about. No, really, this thing has gone through a lot of revisions. At first, you'd think about this topic and then go, well, okay, the sales numbers would determine to a company how successful their investment was, and consumers would use it as a metric for how many people wanted to experience the game. And on the surface level, yes, that happens constantly, but digging deeper, sales numbers seem to be a misrepresented statistic. I understand that most of you watching this probably aren't the type of people to do this, but sales numbers are an extremely common form of proof that one game is better than another. I mean, this doesn't even stop at games. Everywhere you see arguments and memes dedicated to how well something outsold something else. Thankfully, I don't need the rest of this video to tell you why it's stupid to do something like this. We live in a world where Ubisoft's X-Defiant is probably going to get more sales than Ultrakill, so sales numbers will never, ever determine how good a product is. No, instead I'm going to be talking about the second way people misconstrue sales numbers, using it as a base for popularity, more specifically, long-term popularity. I can't sit here and pretend that sales numbers aren't some form of indication about popularity, but to hopefully stop an insane flood of comments telling me that I'm stupid and should quit making videos forever, I'm adding a bit onto the definition of popular. I know that normally popular is defined as something that's liked, admired, or enjoyed by a lot of people or by a group, but for the sake of this video and my argument, I'll be defining popular as something that's liked, admired, or enjoyed over a long period of time. Technically, a better title for this video would be something like sales numbers don't equal long-lasting popularity, but that's not something that rolls off the tongue as well, does it? With that out of the way, what exactly do I mean by sales numbers not equaling popularity? If a game's bad, then it simply wouldn't sell, right, Stryxo? Well, let's go ahead and check out the Wikipedia page for the best-selling games of all time, and I'll try and give you an example of what exactly I mean. Alright, Minecraft definitely deserves its top spot. I have a whole video about that one, so that's no good. GTA 5 as a 2013 release was mind-blowing for the time. It's definitely not as mind-blowing in 2021 on our 6th or 7th re-release. I don't even know anymore. Tetris is Tetris. It really speaks for itself, and okay, Wii Sports for what it was definitely gets to keep its spot without question. Okay. PUBG. PUBG is an amazing place to start. According to this Wikipedia list, PUBG is the 5th best-selling game of all time, sitting at about 70 million sales total across multiple platforms. That's 22 million more sales than the original Pokemon games, 32 million more than Red Dead Redemption 2, 40 million more than Skyrim, and God knows how many times that game's been re-released. It's 15, by the way, 15 fucking times. What is wrong with you, Todd? So what exactly is the takeaway here? With the statistics in mind, it's impossible for me to sit here and say PUBG wasn't popular. Most of you were there for the Twitch streams and statistically probably played the game avidly in 2016 and 2017. It was popular, but popular over a long period of time? Realistically, when is the last time you've ever heard someone talk about PUBG since the beginning of 2019? Seriously, 5th best-selling game of all time, and I haven't heard someone actually talk about this game since the beginning of 2019. All of those earlier examples I compared sales numbers with are games I've heard quite a bit about for various different reasons. Pokemon is the largest media franchise in the world, Red Dead Redemption 2 has continued to be praised and used as a standard for detail and graphics in a video game world, and Skyrim gets forced into our thoughts by being released over and over again. Jokes aside, Skyrim is considered by many one of the best games ever, like all time, a story that people have continued playing since it originally came out in 2011. Why is this then? Why is it that PUBG is the 5th best-selling game of all time, and yet the amount of people talking about it has dropped so much? For sure, it's not for a single reason. There's probably a multitude of videos where people who know much more about the game than I do break down exactly why and how PUBG took such a steep decline, but I can guarantee you that if PUBG was, well, for lack of a better phrase, more fun to play, this wouldn't be happening. Now, don't get me wrong, gameplay-wise, PUBG was alright, rough around the edges, a bit clunky and kinda buggy, but for the people playing, that didn't really matter much. But if you want to be talked about past your prime, if you want to be popular, alright isn't going to cut it. I've said it before and I'll say it again, what makes a game good is the gameplay. Everything else is second to gameplay. Graphics, story, mechanics, all of it. If the gameplay isn't fun, why bother? Unfortunately, there's cases where you could have all of those elements and still have a game not sell because of stupid decisions by publishers. But Titanfall 2 can actually continue to prove some of my points here. Titanfall 2 and PUBG came out around the same time in 2016, and yet Titanfall 2 continued being talked about because of how good it was, and also a mixture of people trying desperately to inform people not to miss out on one of the best FPS campaigns in the industry. This game proves, though, that most of the time, what matters most about a game is that the gameplay is good. You can follow this across other games and even entire franchises as well. Take for example, the entire Persona series of games. I can readily admit I've never played any of these games. I'm not the biggest fan of JRPGs, and considering I just picked up New World while also working on this video and editing other videos for my job, I'm not exactly in a rush to pick one up anytime soon. From what I've heard about this series though, it's amazing. I talked to my friend who's a fan and has actually played these games, and according to him, his recommendation of Persona 5 is that if you're ever going to play a single JRPG in your entire life, heavily consider Persona 5 as that JRPG. So for some, it might come as a shock that the entire Persona series of games was outsold by the GEX trilogy. Seriously, this isn't a joke, you can look it up for yourself right now. This lizard in glasses who had 3 total games sold more than an entire series of JRPGs that spans not only 5 main series games, but also numerous spin-offs. Of course, if I were to ask the average Twitter user who enjoys games which franchises they've heard about more, 9 times out of 10 they'd answer with GEX, because it's a funny joke in a Scott the Woz video. But that 1 out of 10 times that they're actually being serious, Persona would be more recognizable. Now, I already know what you're thinking. I will be slandering GEX just a little bit, but jokes aside, the game in its time was decent. It has some good gameplay and fun levels, but it's 90s. It's been dated hard.
Is it just me, or am I engulfed in flames?
And it's for that reason that GEX was probably never remade and hasn't really been talked about outside of the 90s. For anyone who used to play Modern Warfare 2 back in 2009, or if we're speaking in general terms, people who were absolute warriors in the lobby chat, Nintendogs outsold your game. Honestly, you really shouldn't be surprised by this one, considering I'm comparing 2 completely different games that were under different market conditions, meant for different audiences, and released on completely different consoles, one of which being the second best selling console of all time. Instead, I'll go ahead and compare 2 games that actually have a lot in common with each other. Banjo Kazooie and Croc and the Legend of the Gobbos are games that sold nearly the same amount of copies, came out a year apart, and are in the same genre as each other, but I can put $100 on at least 80% of the people watching right now having probably never heard of the game on the right. While on the inverse, I'm sure everyone watching this video has at least heard of Banjo Kazooie before. In some ways, it's kind of insane how far-reaching this platformer is. I love this game, and honestly, this entire franchise dearly. I was hyped for him in Smash. I even got hyped for Banjo Kazooie being a future title for Nintendo Switch Online. And yet, I haven't played this game even a single time. Everything I've heard about Banjo Kazooie has come exclusively from YouTube game reviewers that I watched religiously years ago. Honestly, I don't know why someone hasn't touched on this, but like, was it a legal obligation for these guys to talk about Banjo Kazooie in one form or another? Croc, shortening this now so I can get ahead of it, on the other hand, is once again another game I've never played, but after hunting down a friend who has, and getting some other opinions from online reviews, it's clear to me why people are talking about Banjo a lot more than Croc. In a time where the platforming genre was nearly at its peak, Croc really needed something to stand out from other similar platformers at the time, but unfortunately it just didn't. Banjo, on the other hand, is still regarded as one of the best in its class. A game with a fun cast of characters, great mechanics, timeless music, and the mythical, all-elusive characteristic that every game strives to have: soul. And that's why people are still bringing up Banjo Kazooie more often than Croc. This all ties back into why I'm making this video talking about games that are or aren't popular by my definition. What matters the most for a video game's overall long-lasting popularity is if the gameplay is good or not. Your game could sell like hotcakes and make it to the top of the charts, but people won't remember or talk about your game past its prime if it isn't good. Of course, there are rare exceptions where sometimes a game is so bad that it becomes popular because of that, but I don't think I need to explain exactly why that's not a good thing to strive for. Your game could have the most realistic graphics ever seen that brings even 3090s to their knees, the coolest looking skins ever put on a gun, great story, and interesting mechanics, but if your gameplay isn't good, if your game isn't fun to play, people won't remember it come years later.